The harsh, dim glow of artificial lights flickered across the cold, metallic walls of the alien prison. Its sharp angles and sleek design stood in stark contrast to the haphazard mess of human bodies shackled to the cold floors. A relentless hum of machinery filled the air, accompanied by the quiet murmurs of prisoners who, though clearly exhausted, still held on to a glimmer of defiance. They had been brought here after their ship had crash-landed on a hostile world, a world governed by an alien empire that had no love for humanity. At the center of the room, the hooded prisoner sat silent. The rest of the crew had been interrogated, broken in one form or another, and their names lost to the cold, indifferent eyes of their captors. Yet the hooded figure, despite the cruel treatments, refused to break. They hadn't uttered a word since their capture, a fact that gnawed at the patience of the Galactic Soldier assigned to guard them. The soldier was a towering creature, reptilian in appearance, its scales glistening under the prison's harsh lights. Clad in an obsidian armor that seemed to merge with its skin, the soldier's long tail flicked with irritation. The uniform was more than just a symbol of power, it was a weapon. It hummed with energy, reacting to the soldier's movements like a second skin. His name was Zorth, and he was nothing short proud of his species' ability to subdue any enemy with ease. Yet the humans, these so-called primitive creatures, had puzzled him. Their resilience wasn't something he'd expected. "You think you're special, don't you?" Zorth sneered, his voice a low growl. His claws scraped against the stone floor as he stepped closer to the hooded figure. "You've got nothing left. You're weak, pathetic. You couldn't even defend your ship." A slight shift. The prisoner didn't respond. But there was a faint tremor in the air, as if the very silence was waiting for the right moment to break. Zorth circled them like a predator, his voice turning from mocking to cruel. "You think you can outlast me? What's your big secret?" "Huh? What makes you so tough?" Still no reply. Zorth's eyes narrowed, confused and irritated. "Not even a peep?" He clicked his mandibles together in frustration. "You humans, you have a reputation for defiance. I wonder, if I just keep breaking you, will you crack?" It was then that the hooded prisoner moved, not with violence, but with a deliberate calm that sent a chill through Zorth's bones. The figure's voice was low, measured, calm in a way that unnerved him. "Call sign Navy SEAL." The words hung in the air like a storm cloud about to break. Zorth paused, unsure what to make of the phrase. His mind sifted through the foreign sound, but it didn't make sense. Navy SEAL? The term carried no meaning in his world. It was a word that should have been hollow, a symbol of nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. The prisoner's head remained bowed, the hood obscuring their face, but there was an unmistakable aura of confidence surrounding them, a confidence that Zorth had yet to see from any of his captives. Zorth laughed, though it sounded more like an exasperated hiss. "Navy SEAL? Is that supposed to be some kind of joke?" But the prisoner didn't respond. There was no defiance in the words, no anger or bitterness, just something chillingly confident, as if they already knew they had the upper hand. It unsettled Zorth more than he was willing to admit. Meanwhile, across the room, Captain Lena Vasquez surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes. She had been trying to piece together an escape plan ever since their ship had crashed on this alien hellscape. She was a woman of few words, but when she spoke, people listened. As the leader of the human crew, she had carried the burden of responsibility with quiet grace. Each decision weighed heavily, and the lives of those around her hung in the balance. They had no time for fear. They had no time for uncertainty. Her crew was a mix of personalities, each as essential as the other. They had come from all corners of Earth, yet they were united in this mission. Escape wasn't just a possibility, it was a necessity. If they were to survive this, they needed every skill, every ounce of human ingenuity they could muster. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Come on, Lena. What are we waiting for? This place is starting to stink worse than the sewers back in New York." Tyler Morales, the wild card of the group, flashed a mischievous grin from his corner of the room. A soldier in his own right, Tyler was a jack of all trades, unafraid to bend the rules or break them entirely if it meant gaining an edge. His jokes were often laced with reckless humor, But in situations like these, his unpredictability often gave the crew the advantage. Lena didn't respond right away. She was too focused on the task at hand. Beside her, Dr. Nolan Hayes, their resident scientist and problem solver, was scanning the room, his brow furrowed as he fiddled with a small device in his hands. He was an odd mix of intellect and anxiety, prone to speaking at length about quantum theories and alien technologies, but always looking for the next puzzle to solve. "We need to find a way to short-circuit their security systems," Nolan muttered, half to himself. "I can try hacking into their surveillance network if I can get close enough." "You're telling me these lizards think they can stop us with security systems?" Tyler snorted. "Maybe we need to show them a thing or two." Lena turned her gaze toward him, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. Tyler's antics might have been irritating at times, but his ability to adapt on the fly had saved them more times than she could count. At that moment, Sophie Chun, the dreamer of their group, stepped forward. "I think it's time we make our move," she said, her voice light, but filled with an unmistakable optimism. Sophie was the idealist. She saw potential in everyone, even in situations that seemed impossible. Her unrelenting positivity had a way of lifting the group's spirits, especially in their darkest moments. Lena's eyes met Sophie's for a brief second. "You're right, but we do this together. We stick to the plan, and we don't take risks unless we have to." Sophie nodded, her bright eyes filled with determination. It was rare to see a dreamer with such steel behind their gaze, but Sophie had been through too much to stay naive. She knew what was at stake. As the crew began to coordinate their movements, the prisoner's words echoed in the back of Lena's mind. Call sign, Navy SEAL. There was something about that phrase, something that felt like it held a key to their survival. The prisoner hadn't broken. And, just like the humans surrounding her, they weren't done yet either. The Galactic Soldier Zora stood at the other end of the room, watching them all closely. He still didn't understand the meaning behind the phrase, but that cold, unsettling confidence was something he couldn't shake. He would make them break. He had to. But Lena knew something Zora didn't. Humanity, no matter how beaten, no matter how broken, would never stop fighting. And they weren't about to start now. The hum of machinery grew louder as the alien guards moved through the corridors of the prison complex, their footsteps echoing through the sterile, cold hallways. Captain Lena Vasquez sat cross-legged on the floor of her cell, her mind racing through the plans they'd discussed, strategies they'd reviewed, and contingencies they'd prepared. She had no illusions about the severity of their situation. The alien empire was vast, relentless, and utterly indifferent to human life. They had expected humanity to be weak. They had expected them to break. But Lena refused to let that happen. Not on her watch. Beside her, Dr. Nolan Hayes was lost in his thoughts, surrounded by scattered tools and alien components. He fiddled with a strange device, a part of the prison security system, no doubt, but his mind wasn't entirely on the task at hand. It never was. Nolan's mind was a labyrinth, always running through puzzles, always searching for connections. It had been this way since he was a child, always seeing problems others couldn't, always piecing together the broken bits of a much larger picture. "Lena," Nolan said softly, his voice cutting through the silence of the cell. "I think I've found something." Lena turned toward him, her gaze sharp. "What is it?" He held up a small piece of technology, a black metal device about the size of a deck of cards. Its edges were sharp, but it was clearly designed to interface with something. I think it's part of the prison's control system. If I can tap into it, I can override some of their security protocols, maybe even shut down a few of their surveillance grids." Lena's eyes narrowed as she assessed the device. "How long would it take?" "I'd need time to study it properly," Nolan replied, his fingers brushing over the smooth surface. "But I think I can get it working in an hour or so, assuming we don't get interrupted." "No interruptions," Lena said firmly, her tone brokering no argument. She stood, scanning the room. "We need to move quickly. We can't afford to wait much longer." The prison was a maze of corridors, each turn designed to disorient, to trap. But the humans had an advantage. They knew how to adapt. Time and time again, humanity had faced insurmountable odds and found a way to turn the tables. It was what they did best. Survive, adapt, and overcome. Tyler, Lena called, and the wild card appeared in the shadows, as always with that irreverent smile plastered on his face. Tyler Morales had never met a problem he couldn't face with a grin and a sarcastic remark. His unpredictable nature often threw people off, but it was precisely that randomness that made him invaluable. "Ready to make some noise, boss?" Tyler asked, his voice dripping with a confidence that bordered on reckless. Lena nodded. "We got one shot at this. Get the guards to chase you. Make sure they think we're still playing their game." Tyler grinned. "Leave it to me." He dashed out of the cell with a purposeful jog, leaving Lena and Nolan behind. The sounds of his footsteps echoed, a deliberate signal to the guard stationed further down the hall. Moments later, the alert chime of the security system began to ring, a sharp, intrusive sound that alerted the entire compound of disturbance. As expected, the response was swift. The prison's automated systems whirred to life, and the guards, 6 of them, rushed toward Tyler's last known position. The wild card wasn't done yet, though. He was leading them directly into the trap. "Got them on the move," Tyler said into his communicator, his voice a mixture of amusement and adrenaline. "You guys better be ready to work fast." Lena motioned for Nolan to get to work. "Now, Nolan, do it." Nolan immediately moved toward the corner of the cell, where he'd been fiddling with a strange alien device. His hands were steady despite the mounting tension. He connected the device to a small panel embedded in the wall, and with a few swift keystrokes, a holographic interface appeared before him, the alien language flickering across the screen. For a brief moment, he cursed under his breath. This was no standard interface. It was a tangle of codes and encryption that made his mind ache, but it was nothing he couldn't crack. "Almost there," he muttered, tapping furiously at the keys. His eyes flickered between the holographic interface and the security feeds that he was able to access. The alien code twisted in intricate patterns, each layer more complicated than the last. But with every second, Nolan saw the pattern emerge. His mind, trained to see connections others missed, began to unravel the complexity. Within moments, he managed to break through the first layer of encryption, and then an explosion of sparks. The security system flickered. "We got a breach," Nolan said triumphantly. "Give it another few seconds, and I'll have control of their surveillance grid." Lena's eyes moved to the hallway, already anticipating the next move. The plan was simple: disable the guards' communication system, disable their surveillance, and make their way to the control room. Once they were in control, they could send a distress signal to the fleet. Their timing had to be perfect. Too much hesitation would alert the rest of the prison. Tyler's voice crackled over the communicator. "Looks like I've got company. The guards are pissed, and I think they're angrier than a ripped scar after its 4th cup of Julka tea. Lead them to the corridor by the control room," Lena said, her voice calm but commanding. "Keep them occupied. We'll be there shortly." "I got you, boss." Tyler's voice was laced with mischief, but beneath the bravado, there was a spark of fearlessness. He had always thrived in the chaos, in the unpredictable. It was his natural habitat. Moments later, the sound of running footsteps echoed, along with the shouts of alien voices, as they followed Tyler's trail. The guards, now distracted, were not aware that the humans were already maneuvering to the lower levels of the prison, moving quickly and quietly, the shadows their only ally. Nolan gave a triumphant grunt. "Done. We've got their comms." And he hesitated as another panel flickered to life, revealing a map of the prison's inner sanctum. "This is it. I've unlocked the way to the control room. It's just ahead." Lena glanced at him, her eyes burning with resolve. "Let's move." Together, the crew moved toward the control room, the tension thick in the air. Every corner, every turn brought them closer to their goal. They were so close, but Lena knew better than anyone that nothing was certain. The Galactic Soldier, Zorth, would soon realize they were no longer playing by his rules. The escape was on, but the hardest part was still ahead. The section ends on a note of tension. The characters poised to enter the control room with the next phase of their plan unfolding, setting the stage for final conflict and the human ingenuity to come. The action is quickening, and the stakes have never been higher. The silence of the prison corridors was unnerving. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lena led the way, her every step measured, her hand hovering near the holster on her belt. Behind her, Nolan, Tyler, and Sophie moved with deliberate speed, their expressions setting grim determination. They were close now, too close to fail. Nolan was the first to break the silence. "I've mapped the route to the control room," he muttered, his voice low. "We'll have to move fast once we're inside. If we don't, the alarms will trigger and they'll lock us in. This place has a layered security system, only one way in, but it's the most heavily guarded." Tyler smirked from the back of the group. "And we've never done things the easy way, have we?" Lena shot him a sidelong glance. "Just keep them distracted. We can't afford to tip our hand until we're in." They rounded a corner, and the control room door loomed in front of them, a massive metal slab with a biometric lock, the kind that couldn't be bypassed by any human tech. But they weren't using human tech. Not anymore. Sophie, the dreamer of the crew, stepped forward, her face a picture of calm. "Let me handle this," she said quietly. "I've got an idea." Lena gave her a quick nod, stepping back to allow the team's resident optimist the space she needed. Sophie wasn't just a dreamer. She was an innovator. She saw potential in the things others discarded, and she had a talent for turning impossible situations into something beautiful. This was her moment. Sophie's fingers danced over a small, portable device she had crafted in the last few hours, using whatever scraps she could find in their cell. The device looked rudimentary, like a crude piece of human engineering, but Lena knew better. Sophie's talent was in her ability to fuse technology, both human and alien, into something new, something unexpected. The question wasn't whether it would work. It was how long it would take to find out. The panel on the door shimmered, and the biometric lock flickered as Sophie connected her device to it. There was a brief hum, a crackle of static in the air, then nothing. A heartbeat of stillness passed, and then the door slid open with a smooth hiss. The security system bypassed in an instant. Lena's breath caught. "You did it." Sophie gave a small, quiet smile. "You doubted me?" Lena didn't answer, but the flash of pride in her eyes was enough. She moved swiftly toward the door, her hand on the grip of her sidearm. "Everyone in now. We don't have long." Inside the control room, alien terminals blinked and hummed with activity. The room was vast, its walls lined with massive consoles and holographic screens that floated in the air, projecting data streams too complex to decipher at first glance. Soldiers moved in a steady rhythm, monitoring the systems, occasionally barking commands to one another. But they didn't expect a threat from within their own walls. Nolan was the first to take action. He dove toward the nearest console, his fingers flying over the interface, already attempting to tap into the system. He didn't need the luxury of understanding the alien language. It was the patterns, the rhythms of the data that mattered. Within seconds, his eyes narrowed in concentration, his mind shifting into high gear. "Their control center is centralized," he muttered to himself. "If I can access the mainframe here, I'll have full access to the security network. But it's going to take a few minutes." Tyler moved in behind him, a cocky grin on his face. No pressure, just a small matter of not getting fried by every single laser turret in this damn place. His voice was light, but his eyes never stopped scanning the room, his fingers tapping nervously against the hilt of his weapon. Lena raised her hand. "We can't afford to wait. Zorith is coming. He'll know something's wrong the minute we're detected. We need to buy Nolan time." Sophie's gaze flickered toward the walls, her mind already working through solutions. "If we disable the surveillance system entirely, we can control the whole layout. I can reroute the turrets, give us access to the guards' comms, but I'll need full access to their mainframe." Lena nodded. "Work with Nolan. If you got an angle on the turrets, do it. Just make sure the room doesn't get too hot." Tyler raised his hand, as if volunteering for something. "I'll keep an eye on the door," he said, his grin widening. Make sure no one decides to ruin our little party. I'm sure those guards will come running as soon as they realize we bypassed their systems." "Good," Lena replied, already moving toward one of the control panels herself. "We'll need to act fast. Once Nolan gets us in, we can signal for backup, But the longer we wait, the more chances we give them to regroup. Nolan looked up, his fingers pausing midair. "There's something else," he said, his voice tense. He froze, his expression shifting from concentration to a flicker of realization. "Oh no, Zortha's already aware. We've got incoming." The air seemed to freeze. The noise from the control room subsided, a heavy silence replacing the usual hum of machinery. A distant thump echoed through the corridors, followed by the unmistakable hiss of security doors sealing tight. Lena's instincts kicked in. "Move. Now!" Tyler dashed to the far side of the room, taking cover behind a column just as the first squad of alien soldiers burst through the door, weapons raised. They had been ready, prepared to deal with any threat. But they hadn't counted on this. Covering fire, Tyler shouted, letting loose a quick burst from his sidearm. The projectile slammed into the first soldier's armor, forcing them to stagger back. It wasn't enough to kill, but it was enough to slow them down. "Status." Lena barked, her voice commanding. Nolan's fingers flew over the console. "Give me a few seconds. I'm almost in." Sophie's eyes locked onto the nearest turret, her fingers working furiously on her device. "I'm rerouting their fire. Just need a moment." Zortha's voice crackled over the comms, deep and guttural. "You think you can outsmart me? You will all die here. This ends now." A dark smile crept over Lena's face. "Not if we have anything to say about it." The final countdown had begun. The crew had no choice but to push through the alien onslaught. The door to freedom was within reach. But so was their greatest test yet. Lena wasn't sure if they would make it. But she knew one thing for certain. They would fight like hell to try. The air in the control room thickened with tension as the first volley of alien fire ricocheted off the walls, creating a deadly dance of sparks and smoke. The soldiers had poured in faster than expected, but they were no match for the chaos Tyler Morales was unleashing. His shots rang out with wild precision, his instincts honed over years of training and experience. The man thrived in moments like this, where the situation was as unpredictable as the terrain of a battlefield. "Get down!" Tyler shouted, ducking behind a column as a bolt of energy scorched the air above him. His voice was tight, but his grin was unshakable. "I thought they'd be faster than this. Must be getting rusty." Lena crouched beside him, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the room. There were too many soldiers for a full-on firefight to be sustainable. They needed to control the flow, to hit them fast and hard. "We don't have the luxury of time. Keep them occupied while Nolan and Sophie finish up." She didn't need to say more. Tyler was already moving, ducking and weaving between the columns, his fire erratic but effective. The aliens, despite their superior tech, couldn't anticipate the unpredictability of a human on a mission. And Tyler? He was pure chaos in motion. Nolan, his face a mass of concentration, didn't even glance up from his terminal. "I'm in," he muttered, his fingers moving faster, pulling up schematics, hacking into systems faster than the soldiers could respond. "I've got their security grid, locking down the lower levels now." Behind him, Sophie's device hummed as she rerouted their systems. She stood a few feet away, her eyes flickering between the control panels and the incoming enemy forces. The chaos was overwhelming, but Sophie thrived in these moments. Her mind worked in overdrive, finding patterns and paths no one else saw. She didn't just solve problems, she redefined them. "They've got a secondary force incoming," Sophie said, her voice even. "I'm triggering the laser turrets now. We'll hold them off long enough for Nolan to finish the shutdown." Lena turned her attention to the security monitors. She could see the incoming forces, an entire battalion moving down the hall, closing in fast. The alien soldiers were smart, methodical, but they didn't understand the chaos of human resolve. And that was their fatal mistake. Nolan's fingers flew over the holographic interface, his mind mapping out every contingency, every possible path. The systems were alien, yes, but they were built on the same principles of logic and structure that Nolan knew so well. "Almost there," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "We got full access. One more step, and I can trigger the lockdown." The door to the control room slammed shut with a deep, resonating clang, locking them inside with their enemies closing in. The thrum of energy shields activating pulse in the air, and the room seemed to grow smaller, tighter with every passing second. Lena felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders, the realization that this could very well be their last stand. "We'll have one shot at this," Lena said, her voice low and determined. She turned to Sophie. "How long until we can clear the turrets?" Sophie was focused, her brow furrowed as she worked. 2 minutes, maybe 3. I can't guarantee that the system won't reset, but it's the best I can do. Tyler's voice came over the comms, tight with urgency. "We got a problem. A big one. Zortha's leading the second squad. He's heading here now, and he's not coming alone." Lena's heart skipped a beat at the mention of the Galactic Soldier. Zorth was unlike any enemy they'd faced before, ruthless, cunning, and far too smart for his own good. His reputation preceded him. He was a master of combat tactics, capable of predicting moves before they were even made. If anyone could foil their escape, it was him. "We need to move, and fast," Lena said, her voice sharp. "Nolan, you're almost there?" "Just a few more seconds," Nolan replied, his fingers pausing for a split second before he tapped one final key. "Done. I've triggered the lockdown. All external doors are sealed. The aliens won't be able to reach us. But we've got a problem." Lena tensed. "What's the problem?" "There's a backup system," Nolan said grimly, "and Zorth is going to trigger it as soon as he realizes we've bypassed the mainframe." "We'll deal with that when we get there," Lena said, her gaze steely. "Sophie, can you hold the turret for us?" Sophie's hand hovered over her device, her mind calculating the best possible outcome. "I'll give you 5 minutes. After that, I'm cutting power to the entire grid. If we're not out by then, we'll have to fight our way out." Lena nodded, her eyes locking with the rest of the crew. Everyone knows their role. We make it out together, or not at all. Without another word, the team moved into action. Tyler was first to break the silence, charging toward the door with reckless abandon. He slammed his shoulder into the nearest guard, sending him sprawling to ground with a grunt of surprise. He grinned back at Lena as he knocked another soldier aside. "Let's do this." Nolan stayed near the console, watching as the alien forces moved closer. "I've got the backup in the system," he said, his fingers dancing across the interface again. "It's a fail-safe. If we're not gone in time, it'll trigger the entire prison's internal security systems. Every trap, every turret. We won't make it past the first door." Lena's jaw tightened. "Then we don't have time to waste." As Tyler fought his way through the aliens, dodging their laser fire and using the environment to his advantage, Lena's thoughts were focused. Zorth was coming, and with him, everything they'd worked for could come crumbling down. They needed to escape now. Sophie glanced at the doors, her expression tense. "I'm rerouting the grid. We've got 5 minutes. I can't promise we'll make it." Lena's heart raced, but her resolve was unshaken. 5 minutes is all we need. The countdown had begun, and the crew was running out of time. With Zorth closing in and the internal security system preparing to lock them down, there was only one option left: break through and make a run for it. In the distance, Lena could already hear the heavy footsteps of Zorth and his forces. The end game was upon them. But Lena knew one thing for sure: humanity never backed down. And neither would they. This section ends on a note of escalating tension. The crew now fully in the thick of the final escape. With their backs against the wall, they must outsmart and outlast their alien captors, all while facing the looming threat of Zorth. The conflict is at its peak, and their next move will determine everything. "You said